The gavel cracked like a bone snapping. Monroe Hartwell's grin stretched wide beneath his hat as he surveyed the crowd gathered in Dry Creek's town square. 40 men, maybe more, their faces dust-streaked and hungry for spectacle. "Last call, gentlemen. 12 head of cattle and one salvaged woman, sold as is." She knelt on the auction platform, bare feet against sun-scorched planks. Her calico dress hung in tatters, wrist rope burned raw, a torn canvas bag clutched to her chest like a drowning woman holding driftwood. Her eyes were somewhere else, somewhere the crowd couldn't reach. Behind the gathering, a windmill stood frozen. Its blades hadn't turned in 3 years. $30 for the lot, Monroe called. "Going once." 40. The voice cut through the murmur. Silas Brennan stepped forward from the back, his last bills crumpled in his fist. Monroe's grin widened. "That won't even cover the cattle, old man." Monroe took the bills anyway, counted them slow, letting each one snap between his fingers. The crowd watched. Some shifted their weight, others looked away. "Sold," Monroe said finally. He stuffed the money into his vest pocket. "Sheriff Wade, you're witness to this transaction." The sheriff nodded from his place by the bank steps. His badge caught the noon light. Silas climbed onto the platform. The woman didn't look at him. He crouched down, careful to keep his shadow off her face, and worked the rope at her wrists. The knots were tight. Someone had meant them that way. "Can you stand?" he asked. She didn't answer, just rose on unsteady legs, the canvas bag still pressed against her ribs. Monroe leaned close as Silas passed. "We'll be seeing you soon, Brennan," he said quietly. His breath smelled like coffee and something sour. "Real soon." Sheriff Wade tipped his hat. The gesture was cold, deliberate. "Don't stray too far now." Silas led her to his horse. The mare tossed her head, nervous at the crowd's energy. He mounted first, then offered his hand. She hesitated, staring at his palm like it might close around her throat. "It's a fair piece to my place," Silas said. "You can ride or walk. Your choice." She took his hand. The land between town and his ranch told its own story. Cracked earth stretched in every direction, dirt the color of old bone. What grass remained stood brittle and sharp. Cattle carcasses dotted the basin, 12 dead in the past month alone. Buzzards circled lazy overhead. Silas offered his canteen after the first mile. She shook her head. "Suit yourself." He capped it, looped it back on his saddle. They rode in silence. The sun hammered down. Dust rose with each step, coating their throats. She sat rigid behind him, her hands barely touching his sides, like she feared what holding on might mean. The windmill came into view an hour later. It stood near the cabin, tall and still against the flat horizon. Not a breath of wind moved its blades. She stiffened behind him. "That thing worked once," she whispered, "before the water dried up." Silas reined the mare to a stop, turned in the saddle to look at her. "How would you know that?" Her face went blank. She clutched the canvas bag tighter. He waited. When she didn't answer, he nudged the horse forward. The cabin was small. One room, a stone hearth, a table with 2 chairs. The roof didn't leak much. Silas swung down, then helped her off the mare. She stood in the yard, swaying slightly, like the ground wasn't quite solid under her. "You can sleep inside," he said. "I'll take the barn." She stared at him. "There's a bolt on the door," he added. "You want to use it? That's fine by me." He unsaddled the mare, rubbed her down, led her to the water trough. The trough was nearly empty. He'd have to haul more from the creek tomorrow if the creek still had any to give. When he turned back, the woman was still standing in the same spot. "You got a name?" he asked. A long pause. "Anna." "All right, Anna. There's beans on the stove. Coffee too, if you want it." He carried his bedroll toward the barn. Behind him, he heard the cabin door creak open, then the scrape of the bolt sliding home. He woke before dawn. The sky was the color of ash. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped once, then went silent. Silas pulled on his boots, splashed water on his face from the basin by the barn door. His back ached. 58 years of breaking horses and mending fence had carved their cost into his spine. He was halfway to the cabin when he saw them. 2 riders coming up the trail, moving slow, deliberate. Silas stopped, waited. Monroe Hartwell rode in front, Sheriff Wade just behind. They reined up 20 feet from the porch. Monroe held a folded paper in his hand. "Morning, Brennan," Monroe called. He sounded almost cheerful. Silas said nothing. Monroe unfolded the paper. "Got something here you need to hear. Legal-like." He cleared his throat, made a show of reading. By order of the Dry Creek County Court, the woman known as Eliza Hartwell, widow of Cyrus Hartwell, is hereby remanded to the custody of estate executor Monroe Hartwell, per settlement of outstanding debts as recorded under the Texas Married Women's Property Act of 1875. The cabin door opened. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, still wearing the torn dress. Her face had gone white. Monroe smiled. "Hello, Eliza. Been a long time." Sheriff Wade's hand rested on his gun belt. Not threatening, just there. "She's legal chattel, Brennan," Monroe said. "Abandoned property under my brother's estate. That $40 you paid doesn't mean a damn thing." Eliza's knuckles were bone white around the doorframe. Monroe folded the paper, tucked it back in his coat. "I'll give you till sundown to hand her over. After that, the sheriff comes back with a warrant for both of you." They turned their horses, rode back the way they'd come. Silas looked at the woman in the doorway, at Eliza. Her real name, finally spoken aloud, she met his eyes. "Every man says he's different," she whispered. "Every single one." She didn't move from the doorway, just stood there, barefoot on the threshold, staring at the dust trail Monroe and the sheriff left behind. Silas walked to the porch, stopped at the bottom step, didn't climb up, didn't crowd her. "You want to tell me what that was about?" he asked. She shook her head, not refusal, just exhaustion. "All right, come inside. I'll make coffee." This time she didn't bolt the door. The cabin smelled like old wood smoke and dust. Silas set the pot on the stove, fed kindling into the firebox. The flames caught slow. Everything was dry, too dry, but at least fire still worked when a man needed it. Eliza sat at the table. She'd set the canvas bag on the floor beside her chair, but one hand stayed on its strap, like it might run off if she let go. Silas poured 2 cups when the coffee boiled, set one in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it, but didn't drink. "Monroe called you Eliza Hartwell," Silas said. He kept his voice level, no accusation in it, just fact. "That's my name," she said quietly. "You told me Anna." "Anna's what I called myself after I ran." She stared into the coffee. Steam rose between them. "Eliza Hartwell died 3 years ago, or should have." Silas pulled out the other chair, sat down across from her. "Monroe said you were his brother's widow." "I was." Her jaw tightened. "Cyrus Hartwell, Monroe's younger brother. He married me when I was 18. Died when I was 23. "What happened to him?" "Drank himself into a ditch. Broke his neck falling off his horse." No grief in her voice, just statement. "He was drunk most days. Mean all of them." Silas waited. "He beat me," she said, flat, simple. Monroe knew, whole town knew, nobody did a damn thing. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, a crow called once. "After Cyrus died," Eliza continued, "Monroe came to the house, said Cyrus owed debts, said I was part of the estate now, had to work it off, showed me papers." She laughed, bitter. "Legal papers. Said the law gave him the right to hold me till the debt was settled." "How much debt?" $1,500. Cyrus never had $1,500 in his whole miserable life." She finally took a sip of coffee. Her hands shook. "Monroe made it up, forged it. Doesn't matter. The law believes paper more than it believes women." Silas leaned back. The chair creaked under his weight. "So you ran?" 3 years ago, got as far as Santa Fe, worked in a laundry, then a hotel, stayed quiet, stayed hidden." She set the cup down. "Last month, Monroe's men found me, dragged me back. He was going to sell me south, New Orleans, maybe Mexico, someplace I'd disappear for good." "Why'd he put you on that auction block here, then?" Her eyes met his, hard, clear. "Because he wanted the town to see, wanted them to know he could do it, that nobody would stop him." Silas rubbed his jaw. 3 days of stubble rasped under his palm. "That paper he read this morning, that real?" "Real enough. Judge Barlow signed it. Monroe owns half the town's debt, judge included." She picked up the cup again. "You can't fight him, Mr. Brennan. The law's on his side." "Law's a peculiar thing," Silas said. "Sometimes it's right. Sometimes it just is." She stared at him. "You paid $40 for me. When do you collect?" Silas stood, walked to the stove, poured himself more coffee even though his cup was still half full, just needed his hands busy. "I didn't buy you," he said quietly. "I bought you out of that auction. There's a difference." "Every man says that first." He turned, looked at her straight. I lost my wife 6 years back, Ruth. Fever took her in 3 days. I couldn't do a damn thing but watch. His voice stayed steady, but something in it had gone rough. Maybe I should have let you stand there on that platform. Maybe I should have minded my own business, but I didn't, and I won't apologize for it. Eliza's face shifted, something between suspicion and confusion. You can stay here long as you need, Silas continued. You can leave whenever you want, but I ain't sending you back to Monroe, not while I'm still breathing. She stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. She picked up the tin cup and hurled it at the wall. Coffee splashed across the boards. The cup clattered to the floor, dented. You don't know him, her voice cracked. You don't know what he'll do. He'll take this place. He'll ruin you. And when he's done, he'll take me anyway. Silas didn't move, just let her words hang in the air. Maybe, he said finally, but he'll have to do it in daylight, with witnesses. She was shaking now, hands, shoulders, breath. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk everything for someone you don't even know? Silas bent down, picked up the dented cup, set it on the table between them. Because some things need doing, he said, whether they make sense or not. She stared at him, then at the cup, then at the canvas bag on the floor beside her chair. For a moment, he thought she might tell him what was inside. Instead, she turned and walked out the door, headed toward the windmill, stood beneath its frozen blades and looked up at the empty sky. Silas watched her through the window. Monroe had called her Eliza Hartwell, but he'd also called her abandoned property. And abandoned property, by law, belonged to whoever claimed it first. She stayed by the windmill for an hour. Silas left her alone. A woman who'd been owned didn't need another man telling her where to stand. He checked the cattle instead. 6 head left, all of them gaunt, ribs showing through hide. They'd need grain soon, but grain cost money, and money was something Silas had just spent his last of. When he came back to the cabin, Eliza was sitting on the porch steps. The canvas bag rested beside her. I came here to die, she said without looking at him. Silas stopped, waited. 3 weeks ago, after Monroe's men caught me in Santa Fe. Her voice was flat, emptied out. They brought me back in chains, kept me in his warehouse for 2 weeks. Then the auction. She picked at a splinter on the step. I was going to walk into the river after, down at the bend where the cottonwoods grow. Let the current take me. Why didn't you? You bid $40. She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were raw. Figured I owed you the chance to regret it first. Silas sat down beside her. Not close, just near. I don't regret it, he said. You will. They sat in silence. A hot wind stirred the dust but didn't move the windmill blades. Monroe won't stop, Eliza said quietly. He needs me gone, or under his control. Doesn't matter which. Why's he need that so bad? She looked at the canvas bag. Her hand moved toward it, then stopped. Because I know something, she said. Something that could ruin him. Before Silas could ask what, hoofbeats sounded on the trail. But this time it was just one rider, an older man on a gray gelding, wearing a black coat despite the heat. Silas stood. Reverend. Eliza tensed. Reverend Amos Cord dismounted slow, his joints stiff. He was 62 and looked every year of it, but his eyes were sharp and his hands were steady as he tied his horse to the porch rail. Silas, he said. Then, carefully, Eliza. She went very still. You know each other, Silas said, not a question. I married her to Cyrus Hartwell 8 years ago, Amos said quietly. In the church on Maple Street. Worst mistake I ever witnessed. He pulled a bundle wrapped in cloth from his Utiyu saddlebag. Brought supper. Figured you might need it. Eliza stared at him. Why are you here? Because I should have been there 8 years ago, when it mattered. Amos climbed the steps, set the bundle on the porch rail. Bread, cheese, dried meat. I heard what Monroe did this morning. Came to see if the rumors were true. They are, Silas said. Amos nodded slowly. Then we've got a problem. They moved inside. Amos sat at the table while Silas poured coffee. Eliza stood near the door, like she might bolt at any moment. Monroe's claiming you under estate law, Amos said to her, but estate law only works if the estate's legitimate. It's legitimate, Eliza said bitterly. Cyrus left debts. Monroe's the executor. Judge Barlow signed the papers. Cyrus left debts to Monroe, Amos said. Convenient, that. Debts nobody else ever heard about till after Cyrus died. Silas leaned against the stove. You saying Monroe made them up? I'm saying Cyrus Hartwell drank away every cent he ever touched, but he didn't owe his brother $1,500. Amos wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I was there when Cyrus died, 3 years ago. He was on his deathbed for 2 days before he finally went. Delirious most of it, but the last few hours, he was clear. Eliza's breath caught. He asked for me, Amos continued, wanted to confess, make peace before he met his maker. The Reverend's voice dropped. He told me things, about Monroe, about money, about the way Monroe had been pressing him to sign papers. What kind of papers? Silas asked. Amos looked at Eliza. Did Cyrus ever talk to you about his father, about the old man's land? She shook her head. Cyrus's father owned the water rights to half this valley, Amos said. Good water, deep wells, the kind the railroad would pay a fortune for when they come through. He paused. The old man died 10 years back, left it all to Cyrus, not Monroe, just Cyrus. Silas straightened. Where's the deed? That's the question Monroe's been asking for 3 years. Amos's eyes flicked to the canvas bag on the floor beside Eliza. Cyrus told me, right before he died, that he'd given the deed to someone he trusted, someone Monroe would never think to look. Eliza's face had gone pale. He gave it to you, didn't he? Amos said gently. Her hand moved to the bag's strap. Eliza, Amos said, if that deed says what I think it says, you're not Monroe's property, you're his biggest problem. She didn't speak, didn't move. Silas crossed the room, crouched down in front of her, eye level. Whatever's in that bag, it's yours, not mine, not the Reverend's, yours. You don't owe us a damn thing. But if Monroe knows you have it, Amos started. He does know, Eliza whispered. That's why he wants me dead. The cabin went quiet. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. How much is it worth? Silas asked. Eliza's voice was barely audible. $10,000, maybe more. The railroad's been buying up water rights all over the panhandle. Amos exhaled slowly. Lord have mercy. Monroe's been hunting that deed for 3 years, Eliza said. Her hands were shaking again. He's killed for less, and he'll kill for this. Silas stood, looked at Amos, then at Eliza. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't get the chance. 2 weeks passed. Monroe didn't come back, but his shadow did. Everywhere Silas went in town, he felt it. The mercantile was where it finally landed. Silas needed flour. He'd stretched what he had as far as it would go, but a man and a woman couldn't live on air and coffee. He rode into Dry Creek mid-morning when the sun was already brutal overhead. The store was empty except for the clerk, a thin man named Pettigrew who'd always been friendly enough. But when Silas walked in, Pettigrew's face tightened. Morning, Silas said. Pettigrew nodded, didn't smile. Silas grabbed a 20-pound sack of flour, a tin of lard, some dried beans, set them on the counter. Put it on my account. Pettigrew didn't move, just stared at the items like they were something foul. Problem? Silas asked. Can't extend you credit no more, Brennan. Silas went still. I've had an account here for 15 years. Had. Pettigrew swallowed. Orders from the bank. Monroe Hartwell bought up your note last week. Says you're overextended. I owe you $12. You owed me $12. Now you owe the bank. And Monroe says no more credit till the debt's settled. Pettigrew looked away. I'm sorry, Silas. It ain't personal. Everything in this town was personal. That was the problem. Silas left the supplies on the counter, walked out. Monroe was waiting across the street, leaning against the bank's brick wall. His coat was pressed, his hat clean. He looked like a man who'd never sweated in his life. Brennan, he called. Pleasant, like they were old friends. Silas stopped. Monroe crossed the street, his boots barely stirring the dust. Heard you had some trouble in the store. You heard right. Shame about that. Credit's a delicate thing, easy to lose. Monroe pulled a cigar from his pocket, bit the end, struck a match. The smell of sulfur and tobacco drifted between them. Could all be fixed, though. Simple transaction. I ain't interested. You haven't heard the offer. Monroe puffed the cigar to life. You give me the girl, I clear your debts. All of them. The mercantile, the feed store, the bank note on your land. He smiled. 15 days till foreclosure, Silas. That windmill of yours ain't pumping water, and your cattle are dying. You can't last another month. Around them, townspeople had stopped to watch. A woman with a basket, 2 men outside the saloon, the blacksmith in his doorway, all of them pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. "She's not mine to give," Silas said. "She's not yours to keep either. Law says different." Monroe tapped ash from his cigar. "But I'm a reasonable man. I'll make it easy. You hand her over. Quiet, no fuss. And I'll even throw in $100 cash. Enough to get you through winter." "No." Monroe's smile faded. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's mine to make." "You think you're protecting her?" Monroe leaned closer. His voice dropped, but it carried enough for the watchers to hear. "You're just making it worse. For both of you. When I come for her, and I will come, it won't be gentle, and you'll lose everything anyway." Silas held his ground. "You done?" Monroe straightened, looked around at the gathered crowd, making sure they saw, making sure they remembered. 15 days, Brennan. Then the bank takes your land, and when you've got nowhere to go, she'll have nowhere to hide." He tipped his hat. "Think on it." He walked away. The crowd dispersed, slow, uncomfortable. Silas stood alone in the street. The blacksmith caught his eye. Looked like he wanted to say something, but then he turned and went back inside his shop. Nobody in Dry Creek wanted trouble with Monroe Hartwell. Silas rode home empty-handed. Eliza was in the yard when he returned, mending a section of fence that had sagged. She'd found Ruth's old work gloves somewhere. They were too big for her hands. She looked up when he dismounted, saw his face. What happened? Town happened. He led the mare to the water trough. It was nearly dry again. "Monroe's tightening the noose." She set down the hammer. "What did he do?" "Bought up my debts, cut off my credit." Silas pulled the saddle off, slung it over the rail. "He made me an offer, you for my land." Eliza went very still. "What did you say? What do you think I said?" She didn't answer, just picked up the hammer again, drove a nail into the fence post. Too hard. The wood split. "Damn it," she muttered. Silas walked over, took the hammer gently from her hand. That post was rotted anyway. "Everything here's rotting." Her voice was tight, angry. "The land, the fences, you." "I ain't rotting yet. You will be, because of me." She yanked off the gloves, threw them in the dirt. "I should have walked into that river when I had the chance. Would have saved us both a lot of trouble." "Don't talk like that." "Why not? It's true." Her eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. "Monroe's going to take everything, your land, your cattle, your life. And when he's done, he'll take me anyway. You can't stop him, Silas. The law's on his side, the town's on his side. God himself seems to be on his side." Silas set the hammer down, looked at her square. "You remember what you told me 2 weeks ago? About that canvas bag?" She went quiet. "You said Monroe needed you gone because you knew something that could ruin him." Silas nodded toward the cabin. "That deed in your bag, that's not just paper. That's proof. Proof that Monroe's been stealing from his own brother's estate. Proof that he's been lying to judges and sheriffs and everyone else. Proof doesn't matter if nobody sees it. And then we make them see it." Eliza stared at him. "How?" Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Reverend Amos mentioned something about baptisms down at the river. Says he does one every month. Public thing. Whole town shows up." So next Sunday he's doing another. He asked if you wanted to be part of it." Silas met her eyes. "Asked if you wanted to be baptized under your real name, Eliza Hartwell, in front of everyone." Her breath caught. Monroe would never allow it. He can't stop it. Not without showing his hand. Not without admitting why he doesn't want people knowing who you really are. Silas picked up the gloves, handed them back to her. "Once the town sees you baptized, here's your name spoken out loud by the Reverend. Monroe can't erase you, not easily. And the deed? We hold it back, for now. But if Monroe tries something at that river, we've got witnesses, the whole town." Eliza looked down at the gloves in her hands, then at the windmill, still frozen against the sky. "You really think this'll work?" she asked quietly. "I think it's better than waiting for him to come in the dark." She was silent for a long moment, then she nodded. "All right," she said. "Sunday." That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He lay in the barn, staring at the gaps in the roof where starlight slipped through. 15 days till foreclosure, 7 days till the baptism. And somewhere in town, Monroe Hartwell was planning his next move. Silas closed his eyes, tried to pray, but the only words that came were the ones Ruth used to say when things got hard. Lord, give me strength to do what's right, even when right don't win. In the cabin, a lamp burned low. Eliza sat at the table, the canvas bag open in front of her. Inside, a single piece of paper, folded, creased from years of hiding. She unfolded it, read the words she'd memorized long ago. Water rights deed, filed 1868, transferring ownership from Josiah Hartwell to his son, Cyrus Hartwell. Witnessed and notarized. At the bottom, 2 signatures, and beneath those, in Cyrus's drunken scrawl, to my wife Eliza, should anything happen to me. He'd written it the night before he died. She'd found it in his coat pocket. The only decent thing he'd ever done. She refolded the paper, put it back in the bag, blew out the lamp. Outside, the windmill waited, and the river, where Sunday would decide everything. The next morning, Silas took Eliza out to the corral. 6 cattle stood in the sun, their hides rough and their eyes dull. They needed branding before Monroe's foreclosure came through, needed proof they belonged to someone, even if that someone was about to lose everything. Ever branded before? Silas asked. Eliza shook her head. He walked to the fire pit he'd built near the fence. The branding iron lay in the coals, its end already glowing dull red. The smell of hot metal and mesquite smoke hung in the air. She stared at the iron, didn't move closer. You all right? Silas asked. That's what Cyrus used, she said quietly. Not for cattle. Silas went still. The iron hissed in the coals. He'd heat a poker in the stove, Eliza continued. Her voice was flat, distant. When I talked back, when I burned supper, when I looked at him wrong. She touched her left shoulder blade through her dress. I've got 3 scars, 1 for each year I was married. Silas pulled the iron out of the fire, set it on a stone to cool, stood there a moment, jaw tight. I'm sorry, he said finally. Don't be. He's dead. I'm not. She stepped closer to the fire, looked at the iron. Teach me. You don't have to teach me. So he did. He showed her how to read the heat, how to hold the iron steady, how to press firm but not cruel, just enough to mark without torment. The first calf bawled when the iron touched hide. Smoke rose, acrid and sharp. Eliza's hands shook, but she held the brand true for the full count of 3. When she pulled back, the mark was clean. A simple B for Brennan. Good, Silas said. She stared at her hands. They were steady now. The second calf was easier, the third easier still. By the 4th, she wasn't shaking at all. When they finished the last one, she set the iron back in the coals, pulled off the work gloves. Her palms were red from the heat, but her face had changed. Something hard and sure had settled there. Thank you, she said. For what? For letting me hold the iron, instead of fearing it. Silas nodded. Didn't need to say more than that. They walked back toward the cabin. The sun was high now, brutal and relentless. Eliza paused by the windmill, looked up at its frozen blades. My father-in-law built this, she said. Josiah. Before Cyrus ruined everything. She touched one of the still blades. He used to say water was the only honest thing in Texas. Said a man could lie, a woman could deceive, but water just was. It came or it didn't. Wise man. He was. That's why Cyrus hated him. She let her hand drop. Josiah left everything to Cyrus. The land, the water rights, all of it. Thought maybe responsibility would straighten him out. She laughed, bitter. It didn't. And Monroe? Josiah cut Monroe out entirely. Said Monroe was too hungry, too willing to sell anything for the right price. Eliza looked at Silas. Monroe's been trying to get those water rights ever since. The railroad's coming through in 2 years. Whoever controls the water controls the route, controls the money. $10,000 worth. At least. Maybe more. She started walking again. That's why he needs me gone. As long as I'm alive and holding that deed, he can't sell what isn't his. They reached the porch. Reverend Amos was sitting on the steps, his horse tied nearby. Afternoon, he said. Thought I'd stop by, see how you're holding up. Still breathing, Silas said. Amos smiled faintly. Good, because I've got a plan. Inside, Amos spread a map across the table. Hand-drawn, showing Dry Creek and the surrounding basin. The river snaked through the eastern edge, marked with a cross where the cottonwoods grew thick. Sunday baptism, Amos said. Right here at the bend. I'll announce it Saturday after service. Open invitation. Anyone who wants to witness is welcome. Monroe will come, Eliza said. I'm counting on it. Amos tapped the cross. Baptism's a public sacrament. Once I speak your name, your real name, in front of the congregation, it becomes a matter of record. Church record, the kind judges pay attention to. Silas leaned over the map. And if Monroe tries to stop it, then he has to do it in front of everyone, has to explain why he doesn't want Eliza Hartwell acknowledged. Amos looked at her. You still have the marriage certificate? The one I gave you 8 years ago? She nodded. Bring it. I'll read it aloud if I have to. Establish you as Cyrus's legal widow, not Monroe's property. His widow. What about the deed? Silas asked. Amos was quiet for a moment. Keep it hidden, for now. Monroe doesn't know for certain you have it. He only suspects. If we play this right, the baptism itself might rattle him enough to make a mistake. And if it doesn't, then we show the deed in front of everyone. Amos straightened. But I need you both to understand something. Once that deed goes public, Monroe won't just be angry. He'll be desperate. And desperate men do desperate things. Eliza's hand moved to the canvas bag sitting on the floor by her chair. He's already desperate, she said quietly. That's why I'm here. Amos nodded. Then we'd better make sure Sunday goes our way. After the Reverend left, Silas and Eliza sat on the porch in the fading light. The sky had gone orange and purple, the kind of sunset that made a man believe in something bigger than drought and debt. You scared? Silas asked. Terrified, Eliza said. Then after a pause, but I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If I'm going to die, I'd rather die standing in daylight than drowned in a river nobody remembers. Silas looked at her, really looked. The girl he'd bought off that auction block was gone. In her place sat a woman who'd learned to hold a branding iron without flinching. You ain't gonna die, he said. You don't know that. No, but I know you got steady hands, and that counts for something. She almost smiled. Not quite, but close. In the distance, thunder rumbled, faint, far off, maybe just heat lightning, but it was the first sound of sky moving in 3 years. You hear that? Eliza whispered. Silas nodded. They sat in silence, listening for rain that hadn't come yet, but might. Saturday evening, Monroe made his move. Silas was checking the cattle when he heard voices drifting up from town. Loud voices, angry, the kind that carried on dry wind. He climbed onto the porch roof, looked toward Dry Creek. Even from 2 miles out, he could see the crowd gathered outside the saloon, torches lit, 20 men, maybe more. Eliza came out of the cabin. What is it? Trouble. They didn't have to wait long to find out what kind. An hour later, Pete Corrigan from the feed store rode up. His face was flushed, his horse lathered. Silas, he called, you need to hear this. Silas met him in the yard. Eliza stayed on the porch, arms crossed. Monroe's been talking, Pete said. He wouldn't meet Silas's eyes. Down at the saloon, buying drinks, telling folks you're harboring stolen property. Says that woman, he glanced at Eliza, says she took something from his family, something valuable. What kind of something? He ain't saying exactly, just that it's worth enough to ruin him if it gets out, and that you're hiding her to extort him. Pete shifted in his saddle. Got half the town believing you're the thief, Silas, not him. Silas felt something cold settle in his gut. Anyone else coming out here? Not tonight, but Monroe's stirring them up good. Says if you don't hand her over by Sunday, he'll ride out here with the sheriff in a posse. Legal-like. Legal, Silas repeated. That's what he says. Pete finally looked at him. I don't believe him, Silas. I know you. Known you 20 years. But there's folks in town who owe Monroe money, who need his credit, and they'll do what he says 'cause they got no choice. Silas nodded slowly. Appreciate you riding out. Pete hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all this. He turned his horse and rode back toward town. Eliza came down from the porch. He's building his case, making me look like the criminal so nobody questions when he takes me. That's about the size of it. Then we're done. He's already won. Not yet, he hasn't. Silas looked toward Dry Creek. The torches still burned. Tomorrow's Sunday. Reverend Amos will do the baptism like he planned, and Monroe will have to show his hand in front of everyone. You think they'll care? The town. Her voice was bitter. They didn't care when Cyrus beat me. They won't care now. Maybe, maybe not. Silas met her eyes. But at least they'll have to watch. That night, neither of them slept much. Silas lay in the barn, listening to the sounds of the land. Coyotes in the distance. Cattle shifting in the corral. The creak of the windmill's frozen blades when the wind tried, failed, tried again. Inside the cabin, Eliza sat at the table with the canvas bag open in front of her. The deed lay unfolded. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. She thought about Cyrus, about the night he'd written her name at the bottom. He'd been drunk, dying, scared of what came after. "Eliza," he'd whispered, blood on his lips. "I'm sorry for everything. I wasn't good, but this..." He'd pressed the deed into her hands. "This is yours. Don't let Monroe have it. Don't let him win." Those were the last words he'd spoken. The only decent thing he'd ever done was die with a conscience. She refolded the deed, put it back in the bag. Tomorrow, at the river, she'd decide whether to show it or bury it, whether to trust the town that had failed her once already. Sunday morning came clear and bright. No clouds, just endless blue and heat that shimmered off the land like a living thing. Silas hitched the wagon. Eliza wore Ruth's Sunday dress, simple gray cotton, mended at the sleeves. She'd pinned her hair back, looked almost like she belonged in a church. Almost. The canvas bag stayed hidden under the wagon seat. They rode into town in silence. The river bend was already crowded when they arrived. 30 people, maybe 40, more than Silas had expected. They stood in clusters along the bank, families, merchants, ranch hands. Some had come for the baptism. Others had come to see what Monroe would do. Reverend Amos stood in the shallows, water to his knees. He wore his black coat despite the heat. His Bible was wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. Monroe was there too, standing on the far bank with Sheriff Wade and 3 men Silas didn't recognize. Hard men, the kind who got paid to do what decent men wouldn't. Monroe's face was calm. Face was too calm. Silas helped Eliza down from the wagon. She clutched the canvas bag now, holding it against her ribs. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "If I run now, I'll be running forever." They walked to the water's edge. Reverend Amos raised his hand. The crowd quieted. "We gathered today," Amos called, his voice carrying across the river, "to witness a baptism. A woman coming back to God, coming back to herself." He looked at Eliza. "Come forward, child." Eliza waded into the water. It was cold despite the heat. She could feel every eye on her. "State your name," Amos said. She took a breath, let it out slow. "Eliza Hartwell." The crowd murmured. Some had known her before, most hadn't. Monroe stepped forward on the far bank. "Reverend," he called, "that woman is under legal claim. I've got papers, and I've got a baptism," Amos interrupted. His voice was iron. "You'll have your say when God's finished." Monroe's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "Not yet." Amos placed his hand on Eliza's shoulder. "Eliza Hartwell, do you come here of your own free will?" "I do." "And do you seek forgiveness, renewal, a new life in the light of—" "Reverend," a new voice called. Everyone turned. Amos pulled a document from inside his coat, unfolded it, held it high. "This," he said loudly, "is a will, signed by Cyrus Hartwell 3 years ago, witnessed by me on his deathbed." He looked directly at Monroe. "It names Eliza Hartwell, his legal wife, as sole heir to his father's estate, including all water rights filed under Josiah Hartwell in 1868. The crowd erupted. Monroe's face went white, then red. "That's a forgery," he shouted. "It's notarized," Amos said calmly, "and witnessed by me and by Doc Farley, who was there when Cyrus died." He looked at the crowd. "Doc, you remember?" An old man near the front nodded slowly. "I remember." Monroe took a step into the water. "She stole that deed. It belongs to the estate, to me." "Does it?" Amos turned to Eliza. "Do you have the deed, child?" Every eye locked on her, on the canvas bag in her hands. Slowly, she reached inside. Eliza's hand froze inside the canvas bag. All those eyes, waiting, judging. She looked at Monroe across the water, at the sheriff beside him, at the 3 hired men with their hands near their guns. Then she looked at Silas, standing on the bank behind her. He didn't nod, didn't gesture, just stood there steady. She pulled her hand out, empty. "I don't have any deed," she said. The crowd murmured, confused. Monroe's face shifted, relief mixed with fury. Then you're wasting everyone's time, Monroe called. Sheriff, arrest her for theft and— But I know where it is, Eliza continued. Her voice was stronger now. And I know what it says. Josiah Hartwell left those water rights to his son Cyrus, and Cyrus left them to me, not to you, Monroe, never to you. Lies. Monroe stepped deeper into the water. She's got nothing, no proof, just a dead man's word against mine. A dead man who confessed to me, Reverend Amos said quietly. Before God and witnesses. Your word ain't worth spit in a court of law, Monroe snarled. Maybe not. Amos folded the will, tucked it back in his coat. But it's worth something here, now, in front of these people. The crowd was silent now, watching, waiting to see who they'd believe. Monroe looked around, saw the doubt on some faces, the calculation on others. He forced a smile. This is all very touching, Reverend. But the fact remains, Eliza Hartwell is bound to my brother's estate by law. She owes a debt, $1,500. Until that's settled, she belongs— I'll pay it. Every head turned. Silas had stepped to the water's edge. His voice was calm, certain. Monroe's smile faltered. You don't have $1,500. No, but I've got land, 160 acres, water access, cattle. Silas looked at Eliza. I'll sign it all over to you, Monroe. Clear the debt, let her go. Silas, no, Eliza started. My choice, he said quietly. Monroe studied him, then he laughed. Your land's worthless, Brennan. It's in foreclosure. Due in, what, 10 days? Less? He shook his head. You've got nothing I want. Then what do you want? The deed. Monroe's voice went cold. The real one, the water rights. That's the only currency that matters. I told you, Eliza said. I don't have it. Then you're useless to me. Monroe nodded to the sheriff. Wade, take her. The sheriff hesitated, looked at the crowd, at Reverend Amos, at the rifle Silas had left leaning against the wagon. Monroe, Wade said carefully, maybe we ought to— I said take her. Wade's hand moved to his gun. The three hired men started forward, and Silas stepped into the water between them and Eliza. No, he said. It wasn't loud, wasn't a shout, just a single word, spoken like a fact. Monroe's face twisted. Get out of the way, old man. No, I'll have you arrested, for obstruction, for harboring a fugitive, for what? Silas's voice cut through. For keeping a woman from being dragged off by a man who's been lying about debts, about water rights, about everything. He looked at the crowd. How many of you owe Monroe money? How many of you signed papers you didn't read? How many of you trust him? Silence. Then slowly, a man near the front spoke. The blacksmith. Name was Hayes. I signed a note with Monroe 3 years back, Hayes said. Interest was supposed to be 5%. Turned out to be 15. When I questioned it, he said I'd signed for 15, said the paper proved it. Another voice. A woman this time. He foreclosed on my brother's farm last year. Said there were unpaid taxes, but my brother never got a notice, never got a chance to settle up. More voices now, murmuring, angry. Monroe's face had gone red. This is slander. I've got documentation for every— Do you? Reverend Amos stepped closer to the bank. Because I've been keeping records too, Monroe. Every foreclosure, every suspicious debt, every family you've squeezed dry. He pulled another paper from his coat. I've been writing it all down, for 3 years, waiting for the right time. Monroe stared at him. You self-righteous son of a— Language, Monroe. We're in God's house here. Amos gestured to the river, the sky, the land, and his house has witnesses. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Monroe turned to Sheriff Wade. You going to enforce the law or not? Wade looked at the crowd, at the faces watching him, at the Reverend with his records, at Silas standing in the water, unarmed but unmoved. I enforce the law, Wade said slowly. But I ain't sure what law applies here. Seems to me this is a civil matter, needs a judge. I am the judge's banker, Monroe hissed. Then maybe that's the problem. Wade took his hand off his gun. Monroe's face went from red to white. He looked at his 3 hired men. They looked back, uncertain now, outnumbered, watched. This isn't over, Monroe said. His voice shook, with rage, with fear, with something else, something that sounded like a man realizing he'd overplayed his hand. He turned and walked out of the river, climbed onto his horse. The hired men followed. Before he rode away, Monroe looked back at Eliza. You can't hide forever. That deed's mine. It's always been mine. Then come take it, she said quietly. Monroe spurred his horse, rode hard toward town. The crowd watched him go. Then slowly they began to disperse. Some nodded to Silas as they passed. Others wouldn't meet his eyes. But they'd seen, they'd heard, and that was something. When the riverbank was finally empty, Silas helped Eliza out of the water. She was shaking, not from cold, from everything. Reverend Amos waded over. That was well done. We didn't solve anything, Eliza said. Monroe's still out there, still angry, still scared, Amos finished. You saw his face. He knows the town's watching now, knows his reputation's cracking. He put a hand on her shoulder. Fear makes men dangerous, but it also makes them careless. What do we do now? Silas asked. We wait, Amos said, and we pray Monroe makes a mistake. They rode back to the ranch in silence. The sun was high now, merciless. The land stretched out in every direction, cracked and waiting. Silas unhitched the wagon while Eliza went inside. He fed the horses, checked the cattle, did all the small rituals that kept a man's hands busy when his mind was too full. When he finally went into the cabin, Eliza was sitting at the table. The canvas bag was open. The deed lay in front of her. I almost showed it, she said without looking up. Back at the river, I almost pulled it out. Why didn't you? Because once it's public, Monroe will do anything to get it. Burn it, steal it, kill for it. She touched the paper with one finger. Right now, he's not sure I have it. He suspects, but he doesn't know, and that uncertainty is the only thing keeping us alive. Silas sat down across from her. How long can we hold out? I don't know. Monroe's smart. He'll find a way to force my hand. She looked up. And when he does, we'll have to choose. Show the deed and risk everything, or destroy it and lose everything. There's a third option. What? We make him come to us, on our terms. In front of witnesses he can't buy or threaten. Silas leaned back. Your father-in-law built that windmill, said water was the only honest thing in Texas. So maybe it's time we let the water decide. Eliza frowned. What are you talking about? Silas stood, walked to the window, looked out at the windmill, still frozen against the sky. That windmill's tied to the water rights, he said. It sits on the land Josiah owned, the land that deed transfers to you. He turned back to her. If we can prove the windmill works, that the water still flows, then the town can see the value of what you own, what Monroe's been trying to steal. The water's been dry for 3 years. Maybe. Or maybe it's just been waiting. Eliza stared at him. You think there's water down there? I think there's only one way to find out. Outside, thunder rumbled again, closer this time. The sky was still blue, but to the west, clouds had begun to gather, dark, heavy, pregnant with rain that hadn't fallen in 1,000 days. Eliza stood, walked to the door, looked at the windmill, at its frozen blades, at the dry earth beneath. If we're wrong, she started. Then we're wrong, but at least we tried. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Let's make it turn. Monday morning, Silas and Eliza started digging. The well beneath the windmill was 40 feet deep, lined with stone. It had been bone dry for 3 years, not even mud at the bottom, just dust and dead insects. But wells didn't die. They just waited. Silas lowered himself down on a rope, bucket in hand. Eliza worked the pulley from above, hauling up debris, old leaves, bird nests, a rusted tin cup someone had dropped decades ago. By noon, they'd cleared 20 feet. By sunset, 30, no water, just more dust. Or, maybe it's gone, Eliza said. She sat on the well's edge, exhausted. Her hands were blistered despite the gloves. Maybe, Silas said. He climbed out, muscles burning. Or maybe we ain't deep enough yet. That night, the wind changed. Came from the west instead of the south, carried the smell of rain that hadn't arrived yet. Silas stood on the porch, watching the horizon. Lightning flickered in the distance, silent, too far to hear the thunder. Storm's coming, he said. Eliza joined him. Will it reach us? Don't know. Been 3 years since a storm made it this far east. They stood in silence, watching the sky dance with light. If we find water, Eliza said quietly, Monroe will know the deed's real, that the rights are worth fighting for. He already knows that. But then he'll come, with everything he has. Let him. Silas glanced at her. Better to meet him head on than wait for him to pick his moment. The lightning flashed again, closer now. Reverend Amos said fear makes men careless, Eliza said. It does. Then we'd better hope Monroe's more scared than we are. Tuesday morning, Silas went back down the well, 40 feet this time. At the bottom, the stone was darker, damp maybe, or just shadow. He scraped at it with his knife. The blade came away wet. "Eliza," he called up. Her face appeared at the well's opening, framed by sky. "What?" "Seep. Maybe more. Haul me up." She worked the pulley, slow, careful. When he reached the top, his hands were shaking. "There's water down there," he said. "Not much yet, but it's coming." "How long?" "Day, maybe 2, if the aquifer's still good." He wiped his face. "But we'll need the windmill working to bring it up, and that means fixing the pump." They spent the afternoon tearing apart the mechanism. Rust and sand had seized the gears, the leather seals had cracked, the pump rod was bent. It took 2 days to find parts, some from Silas's barn, some bartered from Pete Corrigan at the feed store, a few hammered into shape from scrap metal. By Thursday evening, they'd rebuilt it. Silas primed the pump. Eliza watched from the porch, the canvas bag at her feet. He worked the handle. Once, twice, 10 times. Nothing. 20 times. Still nothing. He kept going. Sweat ran down his back. His shoulders burned. The pump groaned and shrieked, metal on metal, dry and angry. Then on the 37th stroke, something shifted. The pump coughed, sputtered, and water, muddy, rust-brown, but water, poured out. Eliza stood, walked slowly to the trough, watched it fill. "It's real," she whispered. Silas let go of the handle, leaned against the windmill's frame, breathing hard. The water kept coming, slow but steady. The trough filled, overflowed, darkened the earth around it. Above them, the windmill blades creaked. A gust of wind caught them. They turned, once, twice, then stopped. But they'd moved. For the first time in 3 years, they'd moved. Word spread fast in small towns. By Friday afternoon, half of Dry Creek knew Silas Brennan's windmill was pumping water again. By evening, a dozen people had ridden out to see for themselves. They stood in his yard, staring at the wet earth, at the trough, at the windmill blades that occasionally turned when the wind caught them right. "I'll be damned," Hayes the blacksmith said. "Water rights," someone else muttered. "That deed's real. Has to be." Silas stood on the porch, watching them. Eliza stayed inside, out of sight. Pete Corrigan approached. "Monroe's gonna hear about this. I expect he will. He ain't gonna like it." "No," Silas agreed. "He ain't." Pete looked uncomfortable. "There's talk in town. Some folks saying you found that water just in time. Convenient-like." "Water don't care about convenient. It's either there or it ain't." "I know. But, Monroe, he's been saying things about how you and the girl planned this, how she's got a deed she stole, and you're using it to steal his inheritance." Pete shifted his weight. "He's calling for a town meeting, Sunday after church, says he's going to present evidence, force a hearing." Silas went still. "What kind of evidence?" "Don't know, but he's got Judge Barlow's ear, and the judge owes him money." Pete met his eyes. "Be careful, Silas. Monroe's cornered now, and cornered animals bite." That night, Reverend Amos arrived after dark. He didn't knock, just walked in like he'd been expected. "Monroe's planning something," he said without preamble. Silas poured coffee. "Town meeting, we heard." "It's more than that." Amos sat at the table. Eliza emerged from the back room, still dressed, like she'd been expecting trouble. "I talked to Doc Farley. He's the one who witnessed Cyrus's will with me. Monroe visited him yesterday, offered him $500 to recant his testimony." "Did he take it?" Eliza asked. "No, but he's scared. Monroe threatened to foreclose on his practice." Amos wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. "Monroe's building a case. Claims the will's a forgery. Claims the deed, if it exists, was obtained under duress. Claims you," he looked at Eliza, "manipulated a dying man." "That's a lie," she said. "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if people believe it." Amos leaned forward. "Sunday's meeting isn't just a hearing, it's a trial. Monroe's judge, jury, and executioner. And he's rigged it to go his way." Silas set his cup down. "Then we don't show up." "If you don't show, he wins by default, gets a judgment against you. Legal grounds to seize the land, the water rights, everything. And if we do show, then you'd better have that deed, and you'd better be ready to prove it's legitimate." Amos looked at Eliza. "Do you have it?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Can you prove it's real?" "It's notarized, signed by Josiah Hartwell and Cyrus, witnessed by a county clerk in 1868. Monroe will say it's forged. Then we'll need the clerk to testify." He's dead. Died 2 years ago. Silence settled over the cabin. There's one other option, Amos said quietly. What? Silas asked. Burn it. Eliza stared at him. What? Burn the deed. Right there at the meeting, in front of everyone. Amos met her eyes. If you destroy it, Monroe can't have it. Can't steal it, can't use it. The water rights go back to the state, get auctioned off publicly, and Monroe has to bid like everyone else. But then I lose everything, Eliza said. You lose the deed, but you keep your life, your freedom. Amos leaned back. Sometimes the only way to win is to make sure nobody else can either. Eliza looked at Silas. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think it depends on what you want more. The land, or your soul. She stared at the table, at the coffee cooling in her cup, at the canvas bag on the floor, holding $10,000 in paper and ink. I'll think about it, she said finally, but they all knew. Come Sunday, she'd have to choose. Outside, thunder rolled. The storm was getting closer, and the windmill blades turned in the rising wind, groaning like a thing waking from a long, dry sleep. Sunday came with clouds the color of bruised iron. The air felt heavy, expectant, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Silas and Eliza rode into town just after noon. The church was packed, more people than Silas had seen in years. They filled the pews, lined the walls, spilled out onto the steps, all of them waiting. Monroe stood at the front beside Judge Barlow. The judge looked uncomfortable in his robes, sweating despite the relative cool the clouds brought. Sheriff Wade stood by the door. His hand wasn't on his gun, but it wasn't far away either. Silas helped Eliza down from the wagon. She carried the canvas bag. Everyone's eyes followed it. They walked up the center aisle. The crowd parted, silent, watching. Reverend Amos stood behind the pulpit. We're gathered today, he said, to settle a dispute between Monroe Hartwell and Eliza Hartwell regarding water rights, property, and the matter of debt. Monroe stepped forward. Your Honor, this is simple. The woman stole a deed from my family's estate, a deed worth considerable value. I'm here to reclaim what's mine by law. Judge Barlow cleared his throat. Does the woman have this deed? All eyes turned to Eliza. She stepped forward, slowly, set the canvas bag on the pulpit. I have it, she said. The church erupted in whispers. Show it, Monroe demanded. Eliza reached into the bag. Her hand closed around the paper, but she didn't pull it out. This deed, she said, her voice carrying over the crowd, was left to me by Cyrus Hartwell, my husband. Before he died, he wrote my name on it, made me his heir. Under duress, Monroe said. He was drunk, dying, didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. Eliza's voice was steady now, strong. He was trying to fix one thing before he died, one thing out of a lifetime of cruelty. Your Honor, Monroe said, turning to the judge, she's admitted she has the deed. I demand you order her to surrender it to the rightful executor, me. Judge Barlow looked uncomfortable. Well, if the deed is legitimate? It's legitimate, Reverend Amos said. He produced the will from his coat. And Cyrus's will, signed before witnesses, names her as sole heir. Monroe's face went red. That will is a forgery. Doc Farley witnessed it. So did I. Amos looked at the doctor in the third pew. Doc? The old doctor stood, slowly. His hands shook, but his voice was clear. I was there. Cyrus signed it 2 days before he died, clear-minded and sober for the first time in years. He was pressured, Monroe shouted. Manipulated by his conscience, Amos interrupted. The only decent thing the man had left. Judge Barlow raised his hand. Enough. Miss Hartwell, I need to see the deed. I need to verify its authenticity before I can make a ruling. Eliza looked at the judge, then at Monroe, then at Silas, standing in the back. He didn't nod, didn't speak, just stood there. Trusting her to choose, she pulled the deed from the bag, held it up. The paper was yellowed, creased, but the signatures were clear, visible even from the back pews. This deed, she said, is worth $10,000, maybe more. It controls water rights that the railroad needs, that this whole valley needs. She looked at Monroe. And you've been hunting it for 3 years, hunting me, because as long as I'm alive and holding this, you can't sell what isn't yours. It's mine by right, Monroe snarled. My father cut me out unfairly. That land should have been, but it wasn't, Eliza's voice cut through. Your father knew what you were. He knew you'd sell it to the highest bidder. He gave it to Cyrus, hoping it would save him. It didn't, but Cyrus gave it to me, and I get to decide what happens to it now." She walked to the stove at the side of the church, the one they used on cold Sundays. The fire was still burning from the morning service. "What are you doing?" Monroe's voice went high, panicked. Eliza opened the stove door. Heat billowed out. "No!" Monroe lunged forward. Silas stepped into his path, solid, immovable. Eliza held the deed over the flames. "You want this?" she asked Monroe. "You want to own everything? Control everything? Sell everything?" "Don't," Monroe's voice cracked. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." She let go. The deed caught immediately, curled, blackened, turned to ash in seconds. $10,000. Gone. The church went dead silent. Monroe stared at the stove, at the ashes, his mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. "It's done," Eliza said quietly. She turned to Judge Barlow. "The deed is destroyed. The water rights revert to the state. Put them up for public auction. Let everyone bid fair." Judge Barlow blinked. That's highly irregular." "But legal," Reverend Amos said. "Property abandoned or destroyed returns to public trust." "She can't," Monroe started. "She already did." Amos closed his Bible. "And every person in this church is witness." Monroe looked around wildly, at the faces watching him, at the sheriff who made no move to help, at the judge who looked relieved that the decision had been taken out of his hands. "You stupid woman," Monroe whispered. "You just threw away a fortune." "No," Eliza said. "I threw away your hold on me." Thunder cracked, loud, close. Through the church windows, the first raindrops began to fall. The rain came down in sheets. By the time Silas and Eliza left the church, the street was already turning to mud. People ran for cover, but they ran slowly, stopping to lift their faces to the sky, letting the water wash over them. 3 years without rain, and now it fell like mercy. Monroe stood on the church steps watching them go. His face was empty, hollow. Sheriff Wade approached him, said something low. Monroe shook his head, climbed onto his horse, and rode away alone. No one followed. Silas and Eliza didn't hurry home. They let the rain soak them, let it wash the dust from their skin, the fear from their bones. When they reached the ranch, the windmill was turning, really turning. Its blades spun free and easy, water pouring from the pump into the overflowing trough. Eliza stood beneath it, face tilted up, eyes closed. "I don't own anything now," she said over the sound of falling rain. "Neither do I," Silas said. 10 days till the bank takes this place." "What'll you do?" "I don't know. Work for someone. Move on. Figure it out as I go." He looked at her. "What about you?" She opened her eyes. "Same, I reckon." They stood there in the rain, two people with nothing left but each other and the choice they'd made. "Thank you," she said finally, "for not letting me drown. Thank you for not making me watch." She smiled, just barely. Then she walked to the cabin, climbed the porch steps, went inside. Silas stayed a moment longer, watching the windmill turn, watching the rain fall. The land didn't care about deeds, it cared about who stayed, who worked, who chose to keep going when there was no reason left but stubbornness and hope. He touched the windmill's frame. The metal was cold and wet and alive. Then he followed her inside. Behind them, the garden plot they'd started last week was already drinking deep. Come spring, something might grow there after all.